Welcome to another mathematical moment from the American Mathematical Society. I'm Layla Sloman, and today I'm talking with Dr. Stan Wagon about a topic that might sound like an oxymoron: square wheels. A new example of a square wheel recently debuted in London in the form of the Cody Dock Rolling Bridge. A special track allows this bridge to roll upside down, making room for boats. Dr. Wagon is a professor of math and computer science at Macalester College, and he constructed a square-wheeled tricycle back in 1997, along with Lauren Callan. Dr. Wagon, thank you for speaking with the AMS. Maybe you can start by telling us, how can a square wheel possibly roll?
Right. Well, of course, a round wheel rolls pretty well in a straight line. And first you have to understand what roll means. Roll in this context means that if you were sitting on a tricycle with square wheels, you would not go up or down. You want to just go smoothly. So from your perspective, it should feel like a normal bicycle or tricycle. And that can be done with a road of a certain shape. So here is actually the first model I had made around 1994. And you can see the road consists of a bunch of linked arches. And a cube here will very happily roll down, and the center of the cube does not go up or down. Of course, the road has to be a special shape, and we can go into that. These arches are catenaries. A catenary is what you get when you hang a chain. Imagine just hanging a chain. It forms a curve called a catenary. And the curves here are inverted catenaries. Turn them upside down.
Mathematically, what is a catenary, and how did you figure out that that was the right shape?
Right, so the equation of the catenary is just, it sounds intimidating. It's called the hyperbolic cosine of x, but it's just the average of e to the x and e to the minus x. And if you don't want e, it could be the average of 2 to the x and 2 to the minus x. That would give you the right shape. The history of how I learned about this is quite interesting. In 1989, I started using Mathematica. It had just come out, and it was an excellent piece of software. And within a few months, the company, Wolfram Research, organized a conference in the Bay Area of San Francisco. So, of course, I went and met lots of new people. And the conference banquet was scheduled to take place at the Exploratorium, a very famous science museum in San Francisco. So before dinner, we're walking around the Exploratorium, and sure enough, they had a square like this with an axle to another square, happily rolling on a sequence of catenaries. And I and another guy, Leon Hall, thought, well, this is pretty interesting. Why does this work? And we stared at it for a while. It was great to look at. And that evening and the next day, we didn't have laptops in those days. We borrowed a computer, and we worked out the mathematics and set up an animation. And we got all that done in about a day and a half. And we understood the reason the curve is a catenary. And it's because as this rolls, the amount you roll on the square has to match the amount you're covering on the ground. Because you want no slipping. And that's actually an important point. When a wheel rolls on a road, there's no slipping. The amount of wheel that unrolls, the circumference of the wheel, is exactly how much it touches on the ground. The rubber never goes forward. So if the wheel has radius 1, then the circumference would be 2 pi. And if you did 1 revolution, you'd cover 2 pi along the ground. Even though it's a special curve, as I mentioned, it's called a catenary, it's actually very close to just a quarter circle. This is not far from just being a bunch of circular arcs, exactly a quarter, because this has to be 90 degrees. So you have 45 degrees there and 45 degrees there. A fellow had the idea that maybe the Egyptians used this to move big blocks of stone to make the pyramids. And I believe some big quarter-round pieces of wood have been found. So it's quite possible you could move a 5,000-pound stone by putting quarter circles down and moving them in front, like you would do with logs normally, and get this thing to move quite a distance.
Why did you decide that you wanted to build a tricycle specifically?
I learned about the mathematics of the problem, and a friend here made this 9-inch model for me, and it all works just fine. And then another friend, Norton Starr at Amherst College, mathematics, sent me, he made, without telling me, a model's about this big. So that was nice. He sent it to me. And then it was natural to think, well, gee, we could just make a real bicycle out of this. And it should work. So a neighbor of mine, the fellow you mentioned, Lauren Kellen, was good with mechanical things, and we purchased a tricycle, cut it in half. It has to be just the right length. The wheelbase has to be just right. He made a 25-foot road that came in 3 7-foot pieces. And you tie those 3 pieces together, and you can have a nice ride. And so we had that open at McAllister. And then a few years later, we made some improvements. We bought a better tricycle. The road stayed the same, but we got a slightly better tricycle. And we put an odometer on it to measure how far it went. And it went something like 15 miles in a year. So students would ride this thing multiple times a day. It's only 25 feet. And it got a lot of use.
Yeah, so let's talk about this new rolling bridge. Maybe you can just tell us, like, what is it and how does it work?
I almost fell out of my chair a couple weeks ago when I got an email from the architect saying they had built a bridge based on this idea. It took about 7 years from conception to installation. Now, the architect, Tom Randall Page, he had the idea of doing it. And I guess when he looked up square wheels, then he saw my work, my bicycle, my papers, and he realized that it could be done. So let me say what this bridge is doing. It's crossing a very small river, almost like a canal. It's called the Lea River, L-E-A. It's in London, tributary of the Thames. And boats go through there every once in a while, not very often, approximately once a week. It might increase. And pedestrians and bicyclists need a way to get from one side to the other. So there's lots of ways of putting in a bridge that you could then raise when a boat came through, typically a drawbridge. But they had their idea of making the bridge have 2 squares. The pedestrians would enter here through one of the squares and exit here. But when a boat came through, just one guy, well, there are 2 guys, but only one guy is applying energy, turns a crank, and the bridge rolls out of the way. And because, of course, it's connected like this, but there's no connection here. So when it rolls out of the way, boats can pass through. They had to build a special road so that this thing rolls as if it were a big circle. So their road, of course, consists of just 2 catenaries because it only has to turn upside down. It starts like this, and it just has this, and it just has to go like this. So it just needs 2 catenaries. And it works.
How is it possible that one person could apply enough force to move this bridge at all?
It's hard to get your head around, but have you ever been in a parking lot with a car weighing 3,000 to 4,000 pounds in neutral? Just lean against the car. It will move. And without any gearing, if you push that car 1 inch, it will move 1 inch. You just got to realize this works just like a round wheel. That's the amazing thing. Okay, now you say, well, wait a second. First of all, a car weighs 3,000 pounds, and you told me this weighs 13 tons.
13 tons.
Correct. That's right. So a car weighs 1 or 2 tons. So it's like 6 cars. So like a semi-truck. Could you move a semi-truck in a parking lot? Maybe not. But it's geared. This crank isn't moving 1 inch to move the truck 1 inch. There's a gearing on this, so that in fact it's not too hard to do. You wouldn't think that this would be a problem. I mean, they had a lot of little issues here. When the bridge is upside down, or when it's halfway to being upside down, now the bridge deck is facing the wind like this. It starts like this, it goes like this, it ends like this. Well, now it's facing the wind, and I guess there's strong winds there, and they could blow the thing in a way that would cause problems. So, also, now the center of gravity of this little cube is obviously in the very center of the cube. It's just a piece of wood. Their center of gravity thing is a little different because they've got this bridge deck here, fairly large piece of metal and wire and so on. And also these two edges are missing up top. So the center of gravity of their thing is quite a bit below the center of the thing. So they injected a bunch of concrete into these two parts, the tops of the square, to balance the thing at the bottom, to bring the center of gravity back to the center. But they made it a little bit below the center, just, I think, 2 inches below the center, so that when you're cranking the thing along to open it, you're actually moving it uphill. That because wind would have a very difficult time moving it now. It's no longer a perfect sail into the wind like this. Now the wind has to move it uphill, and that's not going to happen. They could have done this by rolling around circles along the thing, but they just decided it would look cooler. I think it actually takes a little less space to use the square, and it's a few inches shorter than if they used circles to go around. And of course, it just looks cool when you see it. It looks quite remarkable. And like this, the biggest decision, the biggest step is just that very first step when you say, gee, can't we make some squares that would roll along here? And then everything else just follows with, hard work and so on. But it's that original design idea that's really brilliant.